So, on the air was an idea I came up with a long time ago, actually. It was when I was doing conference calls at my home office, and once in a while things would get interrupted. Not too much, but I thought of this and said this would be a simple way to do it. And so I sketched the idea out. And fast forward to 2020 and all the things that have been going on. And, so it becomes a lot more relevant. So I kind of brushed the dust off this idea and cleaned up a bit and figured I'd show it to you guys. The concept is very simple. It's not much more than an indicator that something's going on in the room, right? Um, and more intended for the home office kind of situation. You've seen all the viral videos and all those fun things. It comes with a simple box, really, that has some kind of display on it. In this case, I'm saying on the air. And it has a metal arch on it, and we'll tell you why that's important in just a minute. You turn it on, the thing turns green. So what will happen is you'll turn it on, and it'll turn into this kind of blinky green beacon, we'll say, so that if a little kid walks up or somebody walks up, they go, oh, well, something's going on in there. And that might be deterrent enough, and you could stop there. That's a really simple way to go about the product. However, the thought was if someone's persistent, maybe they don't know, they're very young, and they grab that doorknob, the idea is that it will turn to red and make a noise. Probably not like a klaxon or a siren or, don't go bananas, because the noise would interfere with what you're doing in the other room, conceivably. So, kind of like the old Donkey Kong game, that kind of noise level, not too bad. A little bit annoying, but you get the idea. So that's the idea, is it would turn into kind of this red on the air. So you're like, oh, something's going on. So a young kid that doesn't know any better might actually back off or be entertained by touching it again and again and again. Don't know. You'll have to decide for yourself. And I show that when it powers off, it's black. So, and that's because of the acrylic. And we'll talk about that in just a minute. So very, very simple. There's not much into it. There's a little bit of electronics in there. And it's not much more than that. So if you look at the construction concept, now I broke this down so that it could be 3D printed, it could be mold injected, you choose your flavor. So I kind of sketched this out, this prototype concept that way. And you see it's a simple box with a handful of LEDs. I picked 4 of each color. You could shrink the whole thing down. This thing's pretty large for what it is, but you could definitely shrink it down and use less parts if you wanted to, as far as less LEDs anyway. So the critical parts are the box, obviously, and the metal arch is very important. And that's because we're going to use capacitive sensing, or when they touch the knob, like I show over here, you're going to change the capacitance of that circuit, and then it'll sound the alarm, right? And I like that idea. It's tried and true. There's a little fussiness to it, so it's going to take a little bit of experimentation in the prototype phase to really figure that out, but it's definitely achievable and has been done before. So we need some kind of metal arch. It could be a metal cable. It could be a plastic with a metal insert. It could be a rigid steel or aluminum hoop. Pick your plan there. But then what we have is, rather than doing a full-on digital display and making the price be $50 or something crazy, I decided to go with a simple gel kind of idea, where you have something that they say on the inside, you print it on the inside, and then the lights shine through this way, right, to make it light up. And that keeps it really cheap and simple. Plus, in theory, you could add different plates, right? You can make the plates removable so they can add their own sayings on there or whatever. The plates use a very special kind of acrylic called LED black acrylic. And LED black acrylic looks black. In fact, I use my Pixelbot uses the same acrylic. And it uses the same, it's a black acrylic. And when you shine light through it, LED light, the light goes through. So that gives you the ability to make it look very much dark when it should be dark. It allows you to use gels like I did here so that it will block the light. And use simple backlighting to get the effect that you want, which is what we want here. So you can see that I did a 2-part system, so that's easy to mold inject or print. And then we have batteries. If you're going to build a prototype, just use AA's. Obviously, you might want to strive for a rechargeable circuit. Those are pretty much off the shelf. You could just buy one, stick it in, hook it up to a USB-C, and you're ready to rock. So pretty straightforward. If you really want to not do the metal arch, the metal cabling, there's an issue there because right in here, you're going to have to do some kind of mechanical coupling, especially if it's a steel cable or even aluminum or something. So you have to have a mechanical coupling. Whereas if you go with the insert, you technically could use a small patch of copper, and copper would be easier to solder to your circuit. So you have to play that game whether you want to go that route, to make it easy to solder, or you want to mechanically couple to it. Both are reasonable to solve. It's just kind of where you want to go with it. So if you wanted to print the hoop that we talked about right here, then you could go with an insert of some sort to hook on that doorknob. The circuit is really, really simple. Well, simple-ish. Let's say simple-ish, right? So what I did is I didn't go with a microcontroller. You could, right? And you microcontrol people go, oh, microcontroller. Well, it's overkill for a microcontroller. Unless you have all these wonderful visions of future enhancements and yada, yada, yada. So that's fine. I totally understand that. But my feeling is I want to keep it simple, but I didn't want to have to do this with discrete circuitry. So I decided to go with something that takes care of most of the capacitive sensing, and that's affordable. And QT1010 has development kits, little kits that you can buy at Adafruit and places like that. So you can play with it, get used to it, and then you put one of these in there, and they're very inexpensive. So with a few external components and the QT1010, you should be able to get what you want out of it. So if you look here, and if you're not used to reading circuits, no worries. It's pretty much all it is, and I kind of explain it here in the blueprint, is that after it powers up, usually they calibrate, right? And you can see by this hoop here, this is the hoop that you're attached to. Let's get that off the screen. And it'll calibrate, and then it waits. And when it calibrates, it switches the LEDs on. Now, the LEDs are blinky LEDs, and I mentioned that here. They're 1 hertz flashing LEDs. So much easier rather than building your own flashing circuit, unless you really want to. You can just buy these with the 1 hertz flashing rate, which saves a ton of power, and it's not too obnoxious, and it simplifies the circuitry. So I really like to use those if I can. Downside is they may not synchronize, right? Because they all have their own, they might be slightly off. So you might get this kind of weird, not strobe effect, but kind of like increase in intensity. I can visualize it now what it's going to look like, but play with it. Of course, if you reduce the size of this down, so if you go up here and we decide to make this much smaller, make the word smaller, everything smaller, then what you could do is maybe get down to 1 or 2 LEDs, which reduces that effect completely. But I would start with the flashing LEDs because it simplifies the prototype. And you really do want to focus on the sensing ability more so than the flashing. That's easy to solve in the end if you really have to. So it's on, it's flashing by itself. And then when they touch it, that's going to trip the QT1010, and that's going to turn off the green and turn on the reds. And the reds turn on consistently. I didn't do flashing on those because they're not going to be on that long unless somebody's just going to hold the doorknob and bleed your batteries dry. They will do that, but sorry, not usually. And then you have a buzzer. Now, it's not a speaker. This is drawn as a speaker, but it's actually a buzzer, which means buzzers come with an oscillator built into it. Square wave oscillator, usually something, it doesn't sound beautiful, but it gets their attention. So the only thing that you have control over a buzzer is the amplitude, how much voltage you're going to give it for how loud it's going to be. So that's the idea there. I used a buzzer because I don't want to make an oscillator. There's no point. So just buy a buzzer and plug it in here, and you actuate it. We're actuating with 3 volts here. As you can see, 3 volts should work just fine. All these parts, I have links to most of these parts in the post and Patreon for everyone who's interested. So that's about it. It's very simple circuit that revolves around this QT1010. Now, real quick, the CV and the RV. The RV is just a volume control. So you might want to, I said we just have a push button and it turns on and off, and that's the way it is. But you may actually want to give the customer the ability to adjust the volume. So if they want to be bananas, they want to go bananas with it, they can crank that thing up to 11, have a good day, right? That might be good. I mean, if you really have a problem with it. If you're like gaming on the other side, you have headphones on and you just want to keep people out, you might crank the volume up because you're not going to hear it anyway because you're defending the universe from aliens and all that kind of thing. But if you're having a phone conference call or doing video conferencing or something, you're probably not going to want to crank that up because you'll hear it. Then again, that's your choice. CV is a little more critical. Capacitive sensing is a bit touchy. So what you want to do is you may want to bring this out to a little dial so the user can adjust it. So they would put it on there, turn it on, touch the doorknob, and if it doesn't work, they'd use the knob to adjust the sensitivity. Now, I would not bring it out to a knob. I bring it out to a screwdriver adjustment or something, or put it inside a panel so no one can mess with it. So it's something to consider, but you want to be able to adjust it because doorknobs might have different conductance that might be next to a metal door frame. I don't know. Maybe you have a metal trap door that leads them to a pit of snakes. I don't know, but there's a lot of objects around there maybe that could affect the capacitance. So your door may not be the same as the next person's door. So it's just, that's the way life is. So yeah, so that's basically it. I do have a simpler idea than this. It's easier circuit wise, but trickier, more mechanically trickier. And I'll put that in the Patreon post for you guys to digest if you want to. But yeah, so yeah, like I said, Patreon post will have more design ideas or more details about this whole idea. If you're interested, some reference links to get you started. But it might be a pretty interesting idea, pretty straightforward to build. So yeah, remember, life is all about experience points, so go out there and get some.